Hey guys, Dr. Decks here. Welcome to our new decking project. Thanks for coming to our channel. We really appreciate it. Don't forget to click that subscribe button if you haven't already. We appreciate that as well. All right, so today's video is about how to demo a deck without destroying the framing. We have a deck that has a good frame, good skeleton on it, and usually I don't do this. This is pretty rare that when we get to a project, or I've already been here, I've already consulted with the clients, we're keeping the frame, but the decking really needs to go and the railing needs to go. And we're gonna freshen this baby up and give it the whole TimberTech AZEK treatment with some Regal Ideas aluminum hand railing. But I thought it might be a cool video to show you how we're gonna do that without just ripping the whole thing and chainsawing the whole thing down. We can't do it that way. We have to take a little bit different approach on this build to have a little more finesse on our demolition today. So lucky for us, the client, he actually did the deck install himself several years ago. He face screwed all these deck boards down with the T20 Star Drive stainless steel screw. So we're gonna pull all those out, but there still might be a few spots here and there that might need a little bit more persuading, we'll say. So we have a couple different deck tear out tools that I'll show you that we have as well for different types of removal of the decking. If you're going to be trying to repurpose a frame, this might be a good video for you guys to watch. So let's get cracking. We've been waiting to show you this for a minute. So we're gonna start taking things apart, doing a little bit of disassembly versus just cutting and hacking, but we're still gonna grab that chainsaw and cut out some rail posts and some rails and stuff like that. That's the first thing that's gonna go. That's the fastest part of the demo. All right, so a couple reasons why we're gonna reuse this frame is the client did a pretty good job. First of all, with his ledger attachment, you can see all the bolts that he used, 1/2-inch lag bolts. So they're put in about every 12 inches or so. So there's also nails installed. Now, on the joist hangers, he did not use structural screws. So we will be pulling those out and putting in some Simpson strong tie SD screws instead, because those ones are not to code. But you'll notice on the tops of all the joists, he ran a product that's called FortiFlash. Now, FortiFlash isn't really designed as a joist tape, but this was done back before joist tape was actually a thing. I used to do the same thing with a product called Vicor made by Grace. So this guy got some really great advice from some friends or professionals that he knew in the industry when he was rebuilding this deck to try and protect the frame, which he exactly did that. This is a great example. We have this debate all the time. People say, why do you use joist tape, or why don't you use joist tape? This is a great example why, because when you see some of the deck boards and how rotten they are, and then you can see how good the joists are, how well they've stayed intact, you can see why this is definitely a frame that we're gonna reuse. Client was really adamant about us reusing the frame. So I'm like, okay, I think we can. It's structurally sound. It's not rotting or decaying anywhere. The decking is, so that's gonna go. But we're gonna pull all the screws completely out. We're not just gonna cut the screws, we're gonna pull them all out. And then we're gonna retape all the joists again with some new G-tape product that we know will last for a much longer time than the FortiFlash has. Because there's certain spots that the FortiFlash, it's not UV stable. And let's go look at that really quick, and I'll show you where the FortiFlash is starting to fail, but it's still really good what he did, because the parts that aren't exposed to the sun and rain all the time are in pretty good shape. But then there's some spots over here that are, and so let's go take a look at that. Okay, so you can kind of see where he put some FortiFlash on top of the beams, and the stuff that's exposed is starting to decompose. It's not really UV stable product, it's starting to come apart, okay? So you can see that. And then over here, it really got cooked, where it's basically coming apart and coming off the joist. So we're gonna take the decking off, we're gonna take the stairs apart, and we're going to get these deck boards out of here, and then we'll clean all this up, scrape it, whatever we gotta do, and then we're gonna install new G-tape on top of that. We'll make sure everything's secured properly, and then we will also come in and add new G-tape here, and then we're gonna put all new fascia in here and make it look really pretty. Okay, but let's go take a look at some of these deck boards. All right, guys, so we're on the upper deck now. This is 5/4 by 4 Western red cedar, tight knot, all right? I've laid millions of miles of this stuff in my career. For the first 10 years of my career before synthetic decking was ever invented, this is all that I did, was laid this kind of decking. So you can see how weak it is. And it's just starting to decompose and decay, all right? But look at the top of that joist. And you can kind of see in between the deck board cracks, see how the FortiFlash label is gone? So the UV protection basically is gone, but it still has some value because it's still protecting the top of this joist. These joists would not be in nearly this good of shape if he didn't use this product. You can see what's happened here. The ends have rotted, the fascia has come in, the boards are starting to rot and come back and dry rot out. You can just see it crumbling in my hands, right? You can see why we're gonna keep the frame and get rid of the decking. Now, some people are gonna say, hey, doctor, why keep the frame? Why don't you just rebuild the whole deck? Well, you know, there's a budget to every client and there's some constraints and they're only gonna be in this house another 15 years. So I said, okay, I think I can give you what you're looking for and still give you that longevity you want and make this deck really nice for you for those next 15 years. And the new clients will still be able to enjoy it as well. So there you go. Okay, now back to why you're here, to show you how to demo the deck. This deck is not going to be demoed by brute force and tearing these boards out like I just did, even though that might be a possibility. Then we have to go around and try to walk on all these screws, and then we're going to bend them over and they're going to start breaking off and that kind of stuff. So we're going to try to extract all the screws first, which is going to take more time. Okay, it is going to take a lot more time, but it's better for the health of the frame, which is what we're trying to keep. So the more that we rip and tear and do that, it's harder on the frame. So we're trying to be as nice to the frame as we can. We planned on spending more time on this demolition than our standard because we have to pull all the screws out, but it's not going to take that long. It's just something we got to do. So we're going to get started on that. We're going to start by taking some of these rails apart and actually unbolting the posts. Normally we just cut them off with a chainsaw because nobody cares because it's all going to the dump. Well, this time the frame is staying and we're just taking up the cosmetic surfaces, the fascia, the decking, and the railing. And then once we have a clean frame, then we can get going on laying some new decking. We have some reframing to do. We'll retape everything and then we'll lay new decking and then fascia and then new railing. So that's the sequence that we're going to do this particular build in. All right, so as we're pulling these screws out, they're stainless steel, which is good, but stainless steel, it has a weaker tensile strength than carbon steel does. So a lot of the heads are snapping right at the top of the screw. So unfortunately, we're gonna have to pry these deck boards up like our traditional way. We're still trying to take as many of these screws out of the frame as I can, but then there's gonna be a lot of screws that are still exposed in the top of the joist, okay? But to get to those exposed screws, I gotta pry up some decking. So what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna go to one board that I can see. It doesn't really matter where, but you can see right here, like some of the heads are snapped, okay? So I'm just gonna take a pry bar and pry this up so I can get the screws exposed in the deck. Okay, so here's one method that if you guys have screws, now this may or may not work because again, stainless steel, like I said, is weak, but you can see the exposed screw. So what I like to do is cinch my drill with a adjustable chuck right down on top of the head of the screw. Whoops. I'm gonna go in slow. And then cinch on it, and then hit reverse on the drill. Okay, you got to make sure you have a nice, good cinch. Okay, I hit reverse, and this one's not doing it. So I'm gonna try to go a little deeper. Try again. Okay, and reverse it out. There you go. So that's 1 out of 1,000, right? So we're hoping that we can get most of these screws out without having to do that. But there are gonna be some that we're gonna have to go back and cinch or drill on. Now, if that doesn't work, sometimes the screw will snap right at the base of the wood and there's nothing I can do about it. The other option is to cut them or break them over, but that's our last resort. We don't want to do that unless we absolutely have to, because it's better for the health of the frame to get the screw out, protect the joist, and then we'll put our new screws in when we install the new decking. That's where we're going with that. Okay, so another thing we have to do is take all the railing apart, but to expedite that, I'm going to take a chainsaw and I'm going to cut these into smaller sections so they're easily loadable and cartable up to our truck. So I'm just gonna start by cutting this rail in half and then cutting it near the posts on each end, and these pieces will basically just fall off. Then they're can easily pick them up and stack them on our cart and then haul them up to the truck. But it's something that has to be done. And then we're gonna leave the posts sitting there, and then we'll get those unbolted in a little bit later step in the demolition process. Don't forget to wear your safety glasses, guys, okay? I always try to make sure that I'm not cutting through nails or screws whenever possible, because that's really hard on a chain. Heads up! Normally I would just cut these off at the base, but because we're repurposing the frame, I'm gonna go ahead and unbolt these before I take them off. Even though they're nice and loose, I could probably, if I push too hard on this, it's just gonna affect the joist or the frame, and it's something I'm gonna have to fix later. So I don't wanna do that. I'm just gonna have some patience and leave these up and unbolt them from the deck. And then once I do that, then I'll pull the post out and then I'll salvage the frame and get rid of the post. So it's just a little bit easier to leave this tall than if I cut it short, then you're just dealing with a little nub. This makes it a little bit easier to maybe give some leverage to pull this out of the deck once the bolts are unbolted. Now, because we have some screws that unscrewed, some screws that didn't unscrew, I'm gonna take just a rear handle saw, and I'm gonna cut a couple lines in the deck. I like to go every 5 to 6 feet because the materials fit better in the back of our truck at 5 feet. We can double stack up till we have a 12-foot bed. So we don't like to leave everything super long. We wanna cut it down into more manageable lengths. It's easier to cart and cart it up to the truck. And it's also easier to stow it in the truck on its way to the dump. So we don't usually use dump trailers. We don't use containers or dump containers. We just use our truck. As long as we pack it really good, it always will take everything we need to get rid of. So I'm just gonna cut a couple lines in here, and then I'm gonna show you a couple different tools that we use to pry deck boards up, okay? So I'm just gonna, for safety, I'm just gonna cut a small section of this deck so that the guys can still get around and work it. If I just start cutting up the whole thing, it becomes a little more dangerous, and we always want to think about safety. We're 10 feet up off the ground. So I'm going to cut this right down the middle. Okay, and then I would normally come over about 5 or 6 feet, but I'm just gonna go half the distance from there to the wall so that I have 2 equal sections that we can tear out. So I'm just gonna cut it right here. Remember, if you try to cut too close to your joist, you might hit screws or nails. It's always bad for your demo blade, so try to cut a couple inches away from the joist at least. And being a professional deck builder, we've acquired a couple different tools for demolition. One is called a demo deck, and you may have seen this on other videos that we've shot. We use this one quite often, and then we also have this other one called a deck wrecker. The deck wrecker uses leverage that is created by putting the tool on top of a joist. So if you don't have a joist to have leverage against, you're not going to be able to pull the deck board out very well. The demo deck, on the other hand, uses leverage against the existing board that is installed, and that's what you pry against to get the material out. You can move it both ways. You can just one pull like that, pulls the board. You can see that this board had a screw in it still. I don't think I let the guys have a chance to pull these screws out with the drill yet, so it's leaving this screw exposed in the top of the joist, but it took our board off pretty easy. Usually what we do is we get started on one joist removal tool. Since this joist removal tool uses the joist as leverage, it can dent the top of the joist when you're prying on it. From right here, it may leave a small indentation on the joist, which could affect how we lay our decking. So I may not use this particular tool if I'm concerned about it making dents in the framing. This decking's pretty rotten, so it's coming up pretty easily. And as we start taking the demo materials off the top of the deck, we always have a dedicated construction pile where we're going to throw all the materials off the deck. Obviously, it's dangerous if somebody's walking below you and you're throwing something off the deck and there's somebody walking down there, they could get hit. So we do a dedicated drop zone, and then we tell everybody involved, hey, this is a drop zone. Don't walk here. We're going to be throwing materials down here. And I've never had an injury before because we know not to walk in that space. Now that there's materials on the ground, odds are nobody's going to get hurt by trying to walk right over the top of the pile while somebody's throwing something down on top of them. Besides that, I can see everybody on my team from up here. We're still all up on top of the deck. The only person that might come down below would be the homeowners, and they're not going to come right up underneath the pile when we're throwing materials down on top of it. So here again, I'll just use the demo deck. One thing I like about the demo deck is you can kind of use it while you're working on different sides of the board. So it gives you a little bit of leverage both ways, okay? So that popped pretty nice. That one's done. Throw it down on our pile. Again, you could go and say, okay, that worked pretty good, but let's see what maybe this one will work a little bit better. I just don't want to make sure I'm not damaging my joist too much by using this particular product, but I think we're fine. And it does have pretty good leverage. Another thing that's cool about the deck wrecker is when you get close up to the house, you can change the type of leverage you use by pulling this pin and spinning the tool this way. And when you take that and you spin it and you put the pin back in, it changes how much leverage you use. So if you want to work on this side of the deck and work your way out, you have really great leverage from this point where I can just pull on the board and pull it out. So a couple cool tools that we use for demoing decks. All right, guys, and then if you don't want to invest in a deck removal tool, or you happen to have a pry bar, a decent pry bar with leverage, I call this a banana bar because it's yellow and it's curved. You could use a banana bar to pry up boards as well, and you're gonna use the leverage off the joist like so on the corner, and then just go through and pry this up as well. And it works, but when you start getting into specific areas, it can be kind of a hassle. So there we go. And there's a couple different leverage points on this as well. So that works pretty good. These screws haven't been removed or they're stripped. So again, you can kind of see on the heel of the banana bar that it's starting to tear the tape that's already been installed on the joists. So that might cause a little more damage. So I probably would opt out on using this because I'm just not trying to damage the board, or excuse me, I'm not trying to damage the tape while I'm tearing this apart, but it works just fine as well. So another option for your arsenal. All right, so we're to the point where we're ready to take a post out. It's bolted through the outside rim joist, so not a whole lot's really holding this on. So I don't have the right size crescent wrench, but what I'm gonna do is just hike onto this nut with a pair of channel locks, and then I'm just gonna loosen it from this side. Okay, so that one is basically done. There's one. I'm not gonna pull that bolt out completely until I have the other one loosened as well. And you might just, I was gonna say might get lucky, but I'd have to have a deep well socket to make that work. So I'll just do the same thing. I'll just hold on to this side and loosen it with a ratchet on this side. Maybe. There we go. Okay, and there's that bolt, or excuse me, there's that nut. Now, both of these are pretty well pulled out. I could take my hammer and just bang it so it's flush. And now this post is ready to come out, but I'm gonna run upstairs really quick and pull it from the top just to make sure that it just doesn't fall on my head or on somebody else. So I'm gonna go up there and grab it really quick. All right, guys, thanks for watching. I really appreciate it. If you learned a little something about how to take a deck apart and not destroy the framing, don't forget to click that subscribe button, hit the bell icon to be notified when we're putting out new content. And thanks for watching this video. We really appreciate you. Have a great day.